Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chiseled. And why do we call it Chiseled? Because we're all work in progress. I'm your host, Rob Commodari. I'm also the author of the book Better Than You Think and co-authored the book Next Level Your Life. Today, I have a guest with me, a special guest, John McCormack from Boca Raton, Florida. Johnny is a great friend of mine. We've known each other, 35, 36 years.
Yeah.
We met playing college baseball against each other. Now he's coaching at the school I went to. And I would say we got to know each other more after ball because we hung out for a good solid year together. Hitting the streets in Boca Raton, Florida.
That's another podcast. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, so I call Johnny my Irish twin. Johnny.
There you go.
He's my Irish twin, a brother from another mother. But we had some great times together. Became really close that last year down there. And welcome to the show, Johnny Mac.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me. And this is awesome. Thank you.
So John he's the head baseball coach at Florida Atlantic University, and he's done very well there. And he's I would say a student of the game, maybe even a master of the game. So John,
no, never. Always a student, never a master.
There you go. And so we actually had a reunion, a alumni reunion about a month ago or so, and it's the first time that some of us have seen each other in 30-some years.
I was shocked at that. We're all on a text chain as well for the people out there, and you guys talk as if all the guys on the text chain played at FAU when Robbie played there, and I knew these guys because we have a mutual really good friend, Pat Murray. But I played at Lynn across the street, and then I became the coach here. So I'm on the text chain. And when you guys all got in town, I didn't realize it was the first time some of you haven't seen each other in that long. That's amazing.
Yeah, and so Johnny put it all together, and it was what a great 2 days. I told him and some of my friends that I felt like I was in heaven for a weekend. So
it was great. That's what it's for. You have that common bond of course, the university, but baseball and all the stuff that goes on. It's that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So John, tell me, obviously you played college baseball. Well, did you always, to give everybody a little context how you got to where you are, what gave you the drive to or when did you want to be a coach, and what gave you the drive to be a coach?
I never wanted to coach. My father growing up coached me all the time, and we fought all the time. Cats and dogs, fighting. That saying always gives cats and dogs a bad name. So I'll come up with something else next time. But I never wanted to coach. I got done my playing career at Lynn, and I came to FAU to get my MBA because I wanted to go to Wall Street and make millions and do whatever. And
I didn't know that about you. I didn't know you had that interest.
That summer, when we both graduated, I was at Pat Murray's house, and we were watching his little brother and Coach Cooney's sons. And Coach Cooney comes to pick up his sons and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm actually going to FAU in the fall to get my MBA." He goes, "Do you want to help us out?" And I was like, "Not really." He goes, "We'll pay for your tuition." I said, "I'll be there." So I showed up in his office, and he'd give me things to do, and Gonzo was there, and Gonzo was a huge help, and he would give me things to do. I would work with these guys. I would do this, and it was fine. And I never had any designs of wanting to coach. And then a year later, we had a conversation about recruiting and putting a team together. And he says, "Well, you want to do the recruiting and put the team together?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know a lot of people. I can help out." And that really, really piqued my interest in terms of, I used to say I'm kind of the GM more than a coach. So the GM of putting the team together, recruiting and scholarships and making the pieces fit, that was more my style than the actual coaching of the everyday on the field, fungo, everything. And then, of course, it's always been part of it. But then I just grew into it. And when I started recruiting, in end of 91, mostly all of 92. The first group that I put together, we ended up going to a regional. I was like, I was hooked from there. I was hooked.
Is that right?
Yeah. So never left.
Wow. So I guess what's interesting to me is, so you'd never been in a job where you recruited anybody, right?
Never.
And you're in grad school, and essentially you're selling
Yes.
FAU.
Yes. Yes.
So did coach
Yes.
give you, was there a script, or was this John just being John?
John being John, walk up. And, the thing about it is, and you played here, and for the folks out there, FAU is a beautiful place, but the athletic facilities are just okay. And my thing is I'm going to get to know these guys, and I'm going to, because at the time I was 23, 24, they were 18, 19, junior college guys. Some of them were 20. I said, I'm going to become close to them and make them feel comfortable that they're going to want to come, that someone's going to be there to look out for them. And I would spend more time talking about other things and less time talking about FAU and baseball. I said, I'm going to get to know them where they're going to have to say yes to us. And it worked. I mean, not that it was a ploy, but I didn't have a script like we run this offense or we do this, or we didn't have any of that. It was just me being me and making friends and saying, hey, I'm here and this is pretty good. Why don't you come and join us?
Yeah, it was great because and I can see that because I know John. I've known him for a long time here, and obviously, I mean, we haven't talked as much over the last several years as we did when we were together down there. But John can sell ice to an Eskimo in Boca Raton.
Yeah, but truthfully, make sure that I did make a promise to myself, because I remember getting off the phone one day with a kid, and just in general, after a number of weeks of phone conversation, and I go, man, you could probably say a lot of things to these kids. And I said, if I lie, if I knowingly lie to somebody, that's when you got to get out,
Yeah. Well, maybe I should watch how I say that, sell ice to an Eskimo. That sounds too salesy, but what I meant by that, he could socialize with anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody.
Yeah.
Because him and John and I, we worked at a couple nightclubs and a restaurant, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we would park cars till like 2 or 3 in the morning, and then we'd hang out for a couple hours after that. And
you had to hustle parking cars, right?
Yeah.
You gotta get the front lot, the back lot. It was fun. Those were good days, man. They were fun.
We had a blast. And that, like you said, that's another podcast. But yeah, what would you say, like what led you to be able to, is it just John being John, like you said earlier, or did you hone any skills, whether it was parking the car thing, or whether it was just, talking to family members all the time? Because how was John able to sell so easily?
Well, it wasn't easy. There was a lot of no's, because especially for the Florida kids, because over the years, by the time I started working here, FAU had been playing baseball only for 9 or 10 years, and they didn't have a lot of local kids. So there wasn't a groundswell, or there wasn't a lot of I know a guy who played there. I know he had a good experience. I'm going to join him. So we started with the local kids, and it was just being honest and upfront. We played a good schedule. We got a nice facility for Division II. We were Division II at the time. We have a really nice facility. We're going to take care of you. We don't recruit big classes. We want to keep it small. We want to give people opportunities. But I think it was more the fact of we got to know them as people, try to draw them in that way, and say, hey, we're going to be here for you. This is not a transaction. This is a relationship. And there's a saying, young people don't care what you know until they know you care.
Exactly.
So that was something that I always had in the back of my mind as you're out there doing that. And then I started going to people that I knew, coaches that I played for, maybe some guys that I played that got into coaching, and say, hey, who could play here? Got a lot of no's, a lot of doors slammed in our face. And then, we broke through. And like I said, in 92 with some guys that I knew when they played in high school and I was in college. So I had a little bit of familiarity with them. And then we ended up winning. We won 43 games that year, went to a regional. So we were kind of off and running, and people were like, oh, I said, we got 2 guys from your junior college. You want to come too? They had a great career. Let's go. So it got a little bit easier in that sense. And then it's harder in other senses. But I enjoyed putting it together, the scholarship, and okay, we have a first base. We need a shortstop. We need a utility guy. We need some relief pitching. I enjoyed that part of it.
You like building something, right?
Yes. Yeah.
John, did you ever give thought to because you said the GM thing, right? Did you ever give thought to getting involved in professional baseball?
Well, it's a funny story. I got offered job scouting throughout my life because recruiting, you have to identify the players, so you're scouting in general, and then you have to take it one step further and recruit them. So I didn't want to leave the Florida area. And most of the jobs I got offered were Panhandle, one in Oklahoma, one somewhere else. And the one time I got pretty close to saying yes. I won't say the organization because the guy is still in baseball. And so we went to breakfast, and he said, "Well, what do you want to be?" I said, "I want to be a GM. That's what I want to be. I think I have a knack for putting the team together and being able to, understand the money and the finances. Of course, at that level, you're talking about huge dollars, a la Ohtani,
Yeah,
700 million. Can
Which
buy
I think
himself
is bad for baseball. I do believe that's bad for baseball. But anyway.
I think you're right, because it's going to leave it pushes the threshold, and the other teams are not going to be able to keep afloat.
Yeah.
So I said to the guy that was interviewing me, and he's still in baseball, so I won't say his name. And I said to him in the interview after he asked me that, I said, "Well, what do you want to do? What would be your ideal job in baseball?" And he goes, "Honestly," he goes, "I got into professional baseball because I was an assistant at a small school making no money, and this was a way to get a full-time job with benefits to get into pro ball, and it's just kind of morphed into." At the time, he was a scouting director. He goes, "What I really want to do is I'd love to be the head coach at an FAU or something like that, where you can be around the guys all the time to make an impact in their lives." And I'll never forget it. We were at a breakfast place down in Davie, and I said, "Really? That's interesting." He goes, "Yeah, in professional baseball, especially in scouting, you develop some relationships, and then the guys get drafted and signed, and then they're gone. You don't, you can interact with them, but you usually don't, because you're on to the next group, where you have to scout them, recruit them, and then coach them and help them get through life and help them get through school. So it's a little bit," he goes, "that's more appealing to me." He goes, "But I'm in this already to be I'm a scouting director, so being a GM is the next thing for me. So there's no time to turn around." And I found it to be interesting, and came back to the university, and Coach Cooney would tell a story. He goes, "I knew as soon as you walked in that you were leaving." And he goes, "I could see it on your face." And at that point, we had been together for, it was just me and him for the most part. And we were together every day for, 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day sometimes. And so we knew each other pretty well. And he goes, "Hold on, don't do anything yet." And he got the AD involved. And it wasn't about money. It was about an opportunity. That's when he revealed to me he was going to be retiring soon, and he wanted me to take over. So I called the Marlins and said, I don't want to, at this point, I'm going to stick. And I never looked back.
Do you think it was because of that conversation when he said about being around the guys all the time that led you to say, "I want to stick," when you had the opportunity to stick?
Well, it's certainly the way he talked to me about professional baseball. And when you're a scout for a professional baseball team, it's a very solitudinal life, right? You don't have an office. You work out of your home. I mean, you have the other scouts that are your friends, but you don't see your coworkers. Like, you might be a scout in South Florida for the Seattle Mariners. It's not like you're walking in the office every day. "Hey, Bill. Hey, Chuck. Hey, Susie."
Yeah.
Going to birthday parties and going to, kids, that type of stuff. So it's a little bit different, and you don't see the progression of the players. You don't see the progression of the players. And I think that, along with, and it all happened in one day, that conversation I had with that gentleman, plus the conversation I had when I got back to campus, I was like, "No, I think this is the best thing for me to stay." And it worked
That's
out.
great. That's great. I love that, because I'm going to go somewhere else with that in a minute, but I want to say something to all those who are listening, because this is not perceived as a business podcast, but John said something earlier in his recruiting piece that it's not transactional, it's relational. Well, in my business, my real estate business, I look at it as a relational business and not a transactional business. So what he's taking in sports, I take in business, you can take in life. If you see somebody as a transaction, like you're going to use them, they're here and they're gone, that's no way to build a relationship. So I love the fact that you use the same like analogy in your recruiting that I use in my business and other people use in their business. It's about the relationship. So thanks for saying that.
And the thing that at this point in my life, the thing that I'm most proud of is those young people that I recruited when I was 24, 25, 26. They now want their sons to play here because I treated their dads like people. And one of the things I tell young people all the time in recruiting is find a place where your worth is not your ERA or your batting average. Try to find someone, and it's tough nowadays because everything is now. You got to find a place that people are a little bit more invested in you, right? And I'm sure you get that with realtors. You see somebody that is going to be good, but they might not be selling, and you've got to kind of prop them along a little bit, and then they might become a star. Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because you said they're finding their self-worth, not their worth in the ERA or their batting average. It's like in our world, don't find your self-worth in the amount of deals you do or the commissions you make, right? So there's so many similarities. And I just remember, I know, like, I use the baseball field as a metaphor for life for me, not the recruit and all that, but still there's the analogies in sports that you can take in life and use them. So that's awesome. And like, this is totally unexpected. I wasn't expecting to go there, but I do want to go somewhere else, because you said when you were talking to that guy, interviewing for that job, you talked about how he wanted to be around the guys, how he wanted to have an impact on their lives. You and I had a recent conversation where you said you found your purpose. And do you mind sharing what your purpose is?
No, not at all.
And then I want you to go into how, because this is going down that other conversation we talked about earlier, how you discovered that.
Okay. In 2015, I was diagnosed with cancer, and we were at a regional, and I had a bad pain in the right side of my face, and I didn't know what it was. And the trainer said, it's a pimple, it's this, that, the other thing, little cyst. We get back from the tournament. I go see our team doctor, and he says, hey, why don't you come in for a full physical? So we do the full physical. He calls me in a little bit of a panic, and he goes, you never told me you were anemic. And I go, you never told me I was anemic. You've been my doctor for 15 years. Isn't that something that's kind of cleared up early in the medical thing? And he goes, we better get you in for more testing. So lo and behold, I had a tumor, neuroendocrine tumor right around my saliva gland. I'd have the tumor removed. Then I had radiation. Then I had chemo. And when I was going through this, I was a wreck because they wouldn't let me drive. I couldn't do a whole bunch. I came to practice. I came to the office every day. I would get up and do radiation early in the morning, the first one there. I would go home, take a little bit of nap, and then my wife would come and get me and bring me to school, and I would teeter-totter around. And then I would wait for her to pick me up because I wasn't allowed to drive because of all the meds, which is probably a good thing. So one Friday, during the end of the no, it was in January, and I just got done with the radiation treatments and the chemo started, and the combination of both of them, I was really sick. And just like everybody says, you're nauseous, you can't eat, everything is a little bit of a struggle. So we started to get back into practice, and I couldn't do a whole bunch. So I would kind of, and my assistants at the time, they did a wonderful job of trying to keep me included, but I couldn't do a whole bunch. I had no energy, I had no strength, I'd lost a ton of weight. So it was a Friday, and on Fridays we have team lifts. And in that team lift, we have competitions. And then usually on those Fridays, we do some sort of, I don't know what you would call it. We do alumni speakers, we do presentations, we do nutrition, we do something to kind of help them, outreach, if you will. I'm not sure the term I'm looking for. So it started to rain and the practice got cut short. And I desperately wanted to go home to lay down. I desperately wanted to go home. I couldn't. I called my wife and she goes, I can't. I got meetings. I can't. I said, okay. I had a conversation with our administrative aide that was in the building. She worked for a couple different sports, and we talked about spiritual stuff. She was real spiritual. And one of the guys is walking by. He's like, "Hey, coach, you coming to the weight room? We're getting started." And I was like, "Well, I got to do something." So I walked up there and I kind of sat in the corner. And they got done. And the strength coach says to me, he's like, "Okay, coach, what do you got for the guys?" And I didn't have anything prepared, and I just kind of walked up, and we were talking about life. And if you really want to accomplish something, you got to make sure you do it every day, and you got to make sure you're invested in it. And being invested in it means the whole day. You can't go to practice and then lift weights and then go out all night. It doesn't really work that well. So as I'm talking, and you've done a lot of public speaking, so you know that you're either capturing people or if you're not, right? And all of a sudden I look up and I could see a few guys, their eyes are riveted on me. And I felt really good about it. So I kept it up and up, and we broke it down, and I ended up leaving. My wife was able to come pick me up, and on the way home, I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, I found my purpose again." And she goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, with that conversation we had the other day, I'm going through this. You feel useful. Everybody's got it useless. Everybody's got to do stuff for you. I can't really engage like I like. I don't have the energy. I don't have the strength." And I didn't know what my purpose was. And the whole ordeal that I was sick, it was a half a year plus. So I get on the phone. I was really excited to tell her I found my purpose. I saw it in their eyes. I know what I'm here for. I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to help these guys get through college and get on with a good life. And that was my driving force ever since, So
You told me this. Thank you for sharing that, John. You just told me this story, a couple months ago, not a month ago, whatever it was.
A month?
Yeah, and like I told you on the spot, it filled me up then, and it's filling me up now.
Yeah.
And I think that's so special to hear. And I hope, I don't know if you do this or not, but I hope the guys know that. I hope the guys get to know that John's there to help them.
I think so. I spent enough time talking about it, and I make it clear in every recruiting talk I have. We had a family here today that, my job as the head coach is to make sure that all the apparatuses you need to be successful, we have in place.
Yeah.
And then my other job is to help your parents finish raising you, to make sure you have the tools and structure in place to have a good life from 25 to 75. That's my thing now. The baseball's the easy part. The baseball's now become the easy part. They think it's the hard part. It's actually the easy part. Life is the hard part.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you found your purpose, but now the purpose was the harder part, finding, and now everything else just falls into place. Everything's easier.
100%. I've said this publicly. Looking back on it, I had the pleasure of having cancer.
You said that to me when I saw you, and I shared that with somebody, and they were like, "What? Say that again. Say that again."
I had the pleasure of having cancer. It changed everything. I find myself to be, which Robbie knows, more polite, because I wasn't so polite back in the day. More polite. I have more empathy for people, and I'm going to tell you why. There's a good story. When all these things happened to me when I got sick, and the first one was I'm sitting waiting for my turn for radiation, and this young lady walks out, and the nurse says to her, and her name is Dominique or Monique, I don't remember, and she's 24, 25. she has a scar on her right around her throat. So I figured thyroid. And I'm sitting there, and every time I went to some treatment, someone brought me. I had my wife took me, my brother came down from Philly, he drove me. Someone would be there for me. So uh, this young lady is standing there, and the nurse says, "What time do you want to come in tomorrow?" And the young lady says, "I have to work." And she goes, I get that. I understand that. But remember, the doctor says radiation is every day. It's every day, 10 to 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer for some people. It's every day. It's a cumulative thing. Um, you have to come every day. She goes, I can't come tomorrow. I have to work. And the nurse, being very nice, goes, well, we open at 7 and we close at 7. There's got to be somewhere in that 12-hour window you could make it. And she's like, I got to work. And the nurse goes, I understand, but I'll even come earlier or stay later. I'll come earlier to open up and then stay later if that would help you. And the girl goes, I need to work. I'm going to get evicted. And I was like, and I'm sitting there, and I felt bad for myself that I'm going through this. Yet I didn't make a paycheck. I didn't have to worry about being evicted. Someone was always here for me. My assistants back at the university taking care of everything. The players are wonderful. And I just started looking at everything differently. I just look at things, differently than I did previous.
Wow.
And I guess if the outcome was worse, I would have maybe looked at it differently. But I was fortunate. I was very fortunate that there were so many people when I got diagnosed and they came back that it was cancer. Everybody, from team doctors to a dermatologist that I go to everything, people mobilized and doors were opened, and I was able to get quicker into some things. And I mean, it's just kind of how it happened. And everybody was fantastic, and the nurses and the doctors were great. Everybody was great. I didn't have a bad experience other than being sick.
Do you but so like I talk about that, like, because we can go through bad experiences, what we again perceive and on the surface are bad experiences, but in your experience you found your purpose.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd always have that, and I knew it, but this crystallized it, right?
Yeah.
I think I always felt that way. I felt that way, but this just kind of crystallized it, because the thing about it is the worst part of having cancer is your mind, because everything just, at least for me, am I going to make it to my son's graduation? If this goes wrong, is there going to be enough money? Are they going to get evicted if I'm gone? So those are the worst part about it is, you're helpless to some extent, and some of the things you could do. Plus your mind, you have so much time by yourself because you're not going to the beach and you're not riding bikes. At least I wasn't. You're not going to Disney. It was treatment, home, work, home, rinse and repeat for half a year plus.
So how much of attitude do you believe contributed to your getting through it?
A ton. And it's, you said you use baseball as a metaphor. That's the power of sport right there. That's the power of sport, right? Because we've all struck out 3 times, and you come up with man on second and third to win the game, and you've got to be tough, right? You've got to be tough. And I took it as a personal thing because I talk to our players about it all the time. I've talked to my sons about it. So now this was time to put my money where my mouth was, right? There's no other greater teaching tool than showing somebody, right? There's no other greater teaching tool than, they're going to emulate my behavior, right? So I just kind of hiked up my bootstraps, so to speak, and just did what I was told to do. But I will tell you, I'm going to give credit to my wife, Katrina, who I met here at FAU. She was amazing. She knew what to say, when to say, and FAU Florida Atlantic was great with her because she was allowed to leave work and drive me places, and she took care of our kids. And my older son Connor had just started driving, so he really picked up a lot of slack, taking my younger son to different things. So everybody chipped in. And again, my mom was in town, so she helped out. And so it was my younger son Shane. He was good. He would just sit with me and didn't ask questions, didn't just kind of sat. And I remember he came in the room one day and he goes, "Are you going to be okay?" And I said, "Well, if I do what they tell me," they said I am. And he goes, "Okay, thanks." And he left. And that was the only time he ever asked about any of it. My older son asked a ton of questions about it, but the younger one, no, Shane didn't ask anything. So
that's great. Hey, John, so you mentioned the word spiritual before. So how much did that play or have an impact at all? Was there, God, why this, or God, please this, or how did God come into play?
Well, I went to Catholic school my whole life, so God is
Irish Catholic, go figure, right?
But anyway, is a central figure in our life. So, it was the one thing that I am proud to say. I never prayed for myself. It was always help them get through it. I you know me, I like to do things, and I always like, God, man, this whole thing is just, it takes on a life of its own, and it affects everybody. So that's the part that, like, people, I would tell the kids, like, go out with your friends, go to the movies, go whatever, you guys go to the beach. Don't worry about me. You live your life. Go do what you need to do. Because I didn't want my issue to affect them. I know it was, but I didn't want my issue to affect them. And then I just had to believe that it was going to be okay. I had to believe it was going to be okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said something. You prayed for the others. You didn't pray for so much for yourself. And I got to tell you, John, this is the second time probably in the last 3 or 4 podcasts I've done that somebody said the exact same words. I had a woman on here that struggled through stuff with her husband, and instead of praying for herself and instead of saying why me, she prayed for that person and just asked God to change her ways, and everything changed in that moment for her, she said.
Yeah,
so that's pretty amazing.
I think it's I think it's quite selfish to pray for stuff that for yourself. I would think he's got greater things to do than to worry about if we win a game or lose a game, or if I win the lottery, or whatever.
Well, how about God help me live?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, people are like, man, you dodged a bullet. It's bad. It's this. It's high grade cancer. This and that. I don't know if it was the doctors. I don't know if it was God. I just never really felt as though my life was in peril. I looked at, I think, because some people are like, yeah, you look terrible, but it's an amazing experience. And I'm going to pat myself on the back. I have really good awareness, and I spent a lot of time watching other people go through it. And, you'd see moms come in, hook up to an IV for chemo, and be looking at the clock saying, hey, I got to pick up my kids at 5:30 from daycare. That's life. I saw a guy unbutton his vest. He had a port in, boom, and he's looking at lunchtime. It's like, I got a meeting at 1:30 because life is continuing to go on. So I was always aware of kind of how other people were dealing with it, and I never really had a bad experience with it. I mean, besides, the sickness and the surgery, and I could have done without some of that stuff, but it was. I wasn't happy it happened, but at the end, it ends up being an okay thing.
Right, because you said you had the pleasure to have cancer. So when you first got diagnosed, was it like, oh, woe was me, or was it, okay, I got this, I'm going to have to tackle this, I'm getting through it?
No, I remember exactly where I was. They did a MRI, a biopsy MRI because it was in a very delicate place in my nerves, trigeminal nerves, and wrapped around some other things. So it was really delicate. And then to make sure that it wasn't in my stomach, I had to swallow a camera and I wore a receiver. And I had to wear it for 24 hours. And I went to drop it off. And when I walked out, the doctor called me, and I was across the street on 13th Street, walking to my car. And Dr. Aptis called me and he says, "Hey, I got some news. It's cancer." I said, "What do we do next?"
Yeah.
"What do you want me to do next?" What? And he goes, "I want you to go to Dr. Chang." So I got in my car and drove to Dr. Chang, and he's like, "I just got off the phone with him. You're here so quick." And I was like, just do what you need to do, or tell me what to do.
Yeah, I would expect that from you. I totally would expect that.
The one thing I do a really good job of, despite what people think, is I do follow directions well. Despite what people think, I do. I'm good at, like, in that type of task-oriented thing, like, okay, get up, let's go. We're going to this doctor. Get up, let's go. We're going, I'm good with that. Like, I'm especially if I trust them. Like, yeah. You tell me, I'll do it. Like, people ask me, "Did you Google it?" Never once Googled it.
That's never good. Once. Yeah, they say don't do that. They say don't. I
didn't do it. No one told me. I just didn't do it. I was like, that's their job. My job is to, do what they say. The only time I ever Googled anything medical was after my first round of chemo. I was so bloated and so uncomfortable. I was trying to figure, like, constipated, bloated, everything. And you're trying to Google, like, how do you get rid of it? So I was doing some yoga poses and stretches, and that didn't really work great.
I can't see you doing yoga.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
That's funny.
Not pretty.
So, that's great, John. So I appreciate you sharing all that, man. So, like,
my pleasure.
I want to ask you, like, well, let me ask you this: how you doing now? Clean bill of health? You got to watch things?
The cancer hasn't come back, so it's been 7, 8 years. I have some residual issues from it. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. My kidneys aren't in great shape because of all the chemo, and I have some hearing damage from the radiation. But the alternative is way worse.
Yeah, right.
Alternative is way worse.
So, I mean, you're allowed to say whatever you want to say on here, by the way.
Okay. I didn't know if you had some laws against.
No, it's medical. All good. It's all well. It's all genuine.
But it's the thing about it is once you're in the medical kind of treadmill, they have a good way of keeping you there. I was at a doctor's appointment today. But I do applaud all those people who work in those. It's not easy. Like, you sit down and people are pouring their heart out, especially the nurses in the infusion rooms and the radiation. They were amazing people. Like, I'm sure they've seen some really bad things, and people sometimes don't survive. And I was sitting there once, and someone walks in and says, "Hey, man, I haven't seen Mr. Smith lately." And the other nurse, and again, I was kind of paying attention. The other nurse goes, so I'm sure that happens a fair amount. So I give them a lot of credit because it's not easy. It's not easy.
Man, hey, John, I got to ask everybody one final question every time before we end the podcast. And the question is this: how much more chiseling does John McCormack got going on in his life?
Oh, it's funny you use the work in progress.
Yeah.
I always say WIP, work in progress. WIP. Right. We're all a work in progress. And by the way, he didn't tell me to say that.
I paid him.
Yeah. I don't think anybody is. If you're done, then you're in trouble. If you think you're done, then you're in trouble, right? I consider myself a lifelong learner. I enjoy reading. I enjoy this type of stuff. I enjoy listening to podcasts. I would say I'm a good 50% in.
Well, that's good because you're what, 56 right now?
Yeah.
56. Yeah. So that means if you're 50% in, maybe you're going to 112. I'm hoping to get to 100. So.
I better have a conversation with some of those blue zone people if I'm going to make it to 112. Diet, not good.
Yeah.
The one thing I am kind of getting into is some of that alternative type medicine with food and herbs, and trying to, at least. I'm not great at it, but to try to, because God knows I've had a lot of medicine poured in me, and it's caused some issues, and maybe there's a better way.
Yes. So you're looking into that now?
Yes. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting that, and if you believe the people you read, like, why isn't everybody doing this? Why are we not doing more of, that type of stuff? But, I don't know if you can monetize it as much as medicine has been monetized. It's sad to say,
Yeah,
it's
you're
sad
right.
to say.
But I mean, like it's a lot of this stuff is about your diet. Some of this stuff
Oh,
can,
100%.
yeah, some of it can be prevented. They say. I mean, I don't know if factually, but we if we eat clean, maybe we live clean. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. People ask, we have recruiting talks, and people say, "Oh, what's your nutrition policy?" And I go, first of all, we can't start talking about 9-grain bread or skinless chicken until you do two things. Until you could sleep a full 8 hours and hydrate correctly. If you can do those two things on a consistent basis, then you can start talking about 9-grain bread. Because if you eat the 9-grain bread, but you're only sleeping 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, especially for college kids, it doesn't do you any good, because your body's not going to be able to metabolize anything, and it clears your brain for the next day of learning. I think sleep is, and I'm terrible at it, but I think it's the most important thing. I think it's the most important thing.
Do you get 8 hours sleep a night?
No.
Yeah, neither do I.
No.
Yeah.
I wish I could, because I do, the stuff I've read, I believe in it completely, but it's impossible.
It's who you are. It's who you are.
It's impossible. And I'm sure 8 hours is a number that was thrown out there, and 5 or 6, they say, like Elon Musk only sleeps 4 or 5 hours a night, which that might be enough time for his brain clear itself. And especially, I tell our guys all the time, your muscles grow overnight when you're sleeping, right?
Yeah.
The stuff that you learn during the day gets embedded in your brain when you're sleeping. So if you don't sleep, you wasted all the stuff you've done all day.
Exactly.
And then of course you need to hydrate to help your brain do that stuff. But I think that, and again, I don't own any farms. I don't own processed food plants. I don't own meat packing plant. I don't own any of it. But I think that nutrition thing should be taught in 7th, 8th grade, right?
Yeah.
For the young people that don't eat so much sugar, don't drink so much soda, don't eat some more fruits and vegetables, eat some clean meats, and I think it would do the nation a world of good, right?
I totally agree with you. I got to work on the sugar part. I got a problem with that.
Everybody likes a good donut, Robbie.
Oh yeah, I've had my share.
Yeah.
Hey John, man, you've been great. I totally appreciate you being vulnerable here and sharing everything.
My pleasure.
If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, whether it's for to talk about how you went through this process and the cancer, or if maybe there's somebody out there whose kid wants to play baseball and they want to connect with you there.
Jump on the website, fausports.com, go to baseball, and I'm there.
There you go.
There, and if I can help you, I will. I had a when I was going through it, there was, because of my job, there were some stories written about what was going on. And the interesting thing about it, at the time that I was kind of ending, we had a player start going through the same thing. Not the same type of cancer, but he had a form of leukemia, which is an unbelievable story. And he's fine now. He's a firefighter down in Miramar, Florida. Great human being. I had a woman that emailed me out of the blue and said, I read your story. I tracked you down. You talked about a great doctor. Can you give me the name and number and maybe a little bit of a referral? she goes, I've been through 2 different surgeons. It hasn't taken. I said, sure. Here's the guy's name. This is about, here's his PA's name and number. And when I was down there one time, she stopped me and said, thank you. And she goes, this surgeon has got to the problem and I'm going to be okay. And I was like, great. Never heard from her again, never anything. So I hope she's great. So,
Wow.
but
That's good.
I tell everybody about this surgeon that I had. And when I got to him, I asked him not to, because a full neck dissection, they had to cut everything. And I used to love to throw BP. It's hard now. It's really, really hard. And I was explaining to him about, hey, could you not cut the nerves? I want to throw BP. He didn't even know what I was talking about. He's like, BP, what's BP?
Blood pressure.
Yeah. He goes, and I explained it to him. He's like, oh, okay. So as I was going for the follow-ups, he goes, did you tell people about me? I said, I've told everybody. You've healed me. And he goes, because now I've gotten 3 more baseball coaches that want to come see me and that have presented similar to you. So, if that's the case, thank you. If not, it's just a really, really big coincidence. So
that's awesome, bud. Thanks for sharing that.
You got
John,
it.
Thank you again for being here.
No,
man.
thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, man, you were great. You're going to have a big impact on those who listen. I'm sure it's an inspiring story. And I want to say thank you again. Until next time, everybody, let's go get chiseled.
Yes.